everyone, thanks for joining us on proteking.com.au's interview series. I'm James, this is Ellie, and we're super excited to have John Kiefer, author of Carb Nite and Carb Backloading, joining us. How you doing, Kiefer?
Good. How are you two? I guess this morning for you two.
It is morning for us, yep, 9 a.m. Sydney. You're in Phoenix today, aren't you?
Yeah, correct.
Perfect. Well, Kiefer, we just want to say, to start off, thank you for joining us. It's an absolute treat to have you here. Ellie and I are both big fans of your diets. We are following your diets, so this is great for us as well as our readers. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Great. Kiefer, if you could just give us a little bit of background on yourself and how you came to write Carb Nite and Carb Backloading.
It's funny, I have to tell the story so many times. I should just do a little video clip of it so I can send it to everybody.
We've heard it a few times too.
Yeah, I just, overweight growing up, and unfortunately in school I got made fun of, so I started trying to figure it out and did all the conventional stuff, ate less, exercised more, which was kind of fun. I achieved a lot of great athletic achievements doing that, but I never had the body that I wanted. So I started doing more and more research about the body and actually going to the medical literature instead of depending on what I read in magazines and books and things like that. So, after years and years of doing that, I was helping people along the way and helping them make transformations. And, actually, part of the story people don't know is a friend of mine passed away, and it kind of made me realize I should be doing what it is I really love doing. And so I did. And then another friend challenged me to write a diet book, because every time they told me what they were doing, I told them it was stupid. So they're like, well, why don't you write your own damn book? And I was like, oh, all right. So, I just wrote Carb Nite, and that kind of started off, had some trouble understanding marketing and getting it out there to people when I first wrote it, but kind of got some feet under me, and then wrote Carb Backloading, and here we are.
That's great. Can you touch on what Carb Nite and Carb Backloading are all about? Who they're written for? What sort of results you would expect from each of the books?
Yeah, Carb Nite originally was written for people who just want to be healthier and lose body fat. It wasn't meant for performance audience or athletes. And the basics of it, for the people who don't know, is you don't eat carbohydrates most of the week, really, except for fibrous vegetables, and then you eat them one night a week. And that's taking advantage of a lot of hormonal rhythms that occur over anywhere from 3 to 7 days, sometimes 10 days. So it's really targeting a lot of hormones. And then carb backloading is designed for athletes. And in that one, you're only eating carbohydrates at night, and it depends on your training. And there we're trying to take advantage of some hormonal responses, but also some like circadian rhythms, how the body reacts during the day, and a couple nice tricks we can do to get muscle mass to soak up fats and glucose and keep body fat from doing that.
Great. You touched on training protocols with Carb Nite and Carb Backloading. So if Carb Backloading is more geared towards athletes, is there a training protocol that works best for Carb Nite? Is it weight training? Is it cardio? Is the couch potato going to get good results just from following Carb Nite?
Oddly enough, the couch potato will get good results, good fat loss results from just following Carb Nite. Just that shift in diet makes a huge difference. But actually, the Carb Nite is hard to do a lot of resistance training with. And that's actually why I came up with the shockwave training protocol that you can download for free. It was really designed for low carbohydrate diets to keep resistance training and not overstress yourself and beat yourself up, basically. And of course, anytime you resistance train, you're going to get better results with your lifestyle in general. So, although I recommend resistance training with Carb Nite, people can still get great results even if they haven't started that exercise portion yet.
All right, is there a difference between how men and women should be following the Carb Nite?
Carb Nite, luckily, is, I don't want to say idiot proof, because people do manage to screw it up sometimes. But for men and women, it's pretty much the same. Carb Nite's pretty just robust that way. The hormones that it takes advantage of, even out pretty well for men and women. Women at first might have to be careful with how many carbohydrates they eat on their Carb Nite, but otherwise it's pretty much the same for both men and women.
Okay, so if we're correct in assuming that the main function of the fat loss during Carb Nite and on the ultra low carb portions of carb backloading is getting into ketosis.
It's actually, so Carb Nite, you probably will go into ketosis. That's not always the case. There's some, depending on how long you've been overweight or how out of shape you are, you actually may have a very, very difficult, if almost impossible time going into nutritional ketosis, even with Carb Nite or even taking carbs out of your diet for longer periods of time, like weeks on end. So ketosis isn't really the goal in Carb Nite. Just taking the carbohydrates out of the diet and controlling insulin gives you the vast majority of effects. On carb backloading, it's probably rare that you will go into ketosis very often. You'll probably wake up in ketosis, but again, the goal there is those circadian rhythms and then making sure that insulin is low in the first half of the day, particularly before training, because that's what gives us the ability to wipe out intramuscular glycogen stores, to perform better, to get better responses from our stress hormones, all that good stuff. So the ketosis really is overemphasized in the industry right now, and there's more and more research showing it's just not that important.
Right. So probably don't go for the 2 cups of brown rice or 6 oranges before a training session. Is that what you're telling us?
No, exactly. You want to stay away from
everywhere, though, Kiefer.
I know that in the Carb Nite, the idea is when you remove all the carbs, you're going to replace them with fat. But how do you know if you're eating too much fat or too much protein, for that matter, as well?
It's actually hard to eat too much fat other than just way too many calories. I've actually had people amazingly consume 10,000 calories a day, most of which came from fat. And it was funny, they were frustrated because they weren't losing weight. I was like, you should be glad you're not gaining weight on 10,000 calories a day. So the fat content really isn't as important as too much protein. And that's, it really changes depending on if you're training or not. If you're not training, then your protein needs actually can be pretty low during the fat loss period. And that could be, 100 grams maximum for the day is all you might actually need of protein. So it's really important to get a lot of fat and not worry too much about your protein. If you exercise a lot, then you can get up to at least a gram, 1-to-1 gram ratio of fat to protein. It's probably the max you're going to want to go and still see a lot of good fat loss results without feeling horrible.
So just on that, what role do calories play in this whole thing? Obviously, you said if you're eating 10,000 calories a day, you're probably not going to lose too much weight.
Right.
Is there a sweet spot for most people? We've heard 500 calorie deficit, 10% deficit. Does it matter that much in your experience?
It doesn't matter that much. It's interesting if you just go off of the equations that we use for metabolic rates and you try to target that for your calories on the low carb portions of Carb Nite, you're going to lose weight. It instantly is going to put you in an energy deficit, whether just because the body is working so differently at that point without carbohydrates. Carb backloading, very interestingly, a lot of people can see that they eat about 10% over their metabolic rate worth of calories and still see body recomposition. So they're losing fat and gaining muscle at the same time. So the calories do matter. You can't just say calories don't matter at all, but you have a much wider range of what is going to work.
Sure. And so from a health standpoint, we've seen several studies talking about ketogenic diets can lower risks of disease, mortality, and all that sort of thing. Would you say Carb Nite would be an optimal diet for somebody who is suffering from some of these illnesses, or would carb backloading be better if they can get in the training sessions and then put some cherry turnovers away? Is that gonna is that also going to contribute to better health for most people?
Both of the plans will definitely contribute to better health for people, even if they do have cherry turnovers every once in a while or some sort of junk on carb backloading. It's that power of not having carbohydrates for so much of the day. You get so many benefits. You get less free radical production. You get more of the beneficial cellular processes that allow cells to heal and operate more functionally. Mitochondria, the transport mechanisms to help mitochondria function correctly, don't get as damaged as they do when you eat carbohydrates. Actually, they have a chance to repair. And we even see in cancer cells, not only for people who do have cancer, let's say they've unfortunately gotten to that stage, you take carbohydrates out of their diet, they go into remission. I mean, it's amazing the success they're having with those ketogenic diets.
It seems to go against what most doctors are telling you, you know?
Yeah, it really is amazing. You know, stripping carbs out of the diet for the majority of the week and like Carb Nite, not only could you cure a lot of metabolic diseases and things that terrify people like cancer, you can prevent them from happening in the first place. So it's really a powerful technique. And the carbs are necessary. You know, it's not, I threw them in there in Carb Nite, not so you could cheat, but so that you could keep an optimal, healthy balance, hormonal milieu, you know, just everything keeps running the way it should so you can lose weight and just get healthier and healthier.
Sure. So with the carbs on carb backloading, for example, an athlete who's going to need those carbs for training probably isn't going to have any health issues from having 200 grams of carbs from sugar every couple of nights. That's not going to be as big an issue. Is that correct?
Correct. You know, if you start looking at the numbers and you look through the day, you know, you're going probably about 18 hours without carbohydrates, possibly. That's a long time for your body to operate at its maximum health, maximum efficiency, maximum tissue repair, maximum cholesterol usage, all those things. So even if you throw in a little the junk at night and you're eating the sugar, it doesn't disrupt the system very much from a health perspective.
Sure.
Right, and I just want to know sort of what role insulin plays on the Carb Nite or the carb backloading as well. I mean, are we looking to keep the insulin as low as possible, or
is it just the carbs that we're trying to keep low during the low carb portions?
It's, you know, ideally, especially with carb backloading, in an ideal world, you would be able to get the very large insulin spikes that you can see with quote unquote junk, with less carbs or quote unquote healthier carbs like white potatoes, sweet potatoes, things like that. So really it's that insulin spike that we're looking for. Carb backloading is a little different because you also want to make sure that you are recompensating glycogen stores in your muscle, in your intraskeletal muscle tissue, or intraskeletal glycogen stores, so that you can perform more optimally. And also, if your goal is hypertrophy, that's very important. So the insulin surge is very, very important across all cases. Your carbohydrate content becomes important depending on your training goals.
Right, okay.
That makes sense.
That did.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I could just touch a bit more on that. So on Carb Nite, for instance, you'll be eating fat and protein and vegetables most of the day. Obviously, one day a week you'll be eating quite a high carb load. So is the purpose of the fat to keep you satisfied? Is the purpose of the fat to blunt insulin to some degree? Is it all of that together?
Is this so?
This is on Carb Nite in the non-Carb Nite weekdays.
Okay, the fat is essentially, I mean, that's to basically just force most of your metabolism to become efficient at burning fat is one aspect of that, and then more importantly, that what you mentioned is to keep insulin levels as low as possible, particularly from the protein load. So you stay satisfied, your body still has the signals that you're getting plenty of food, so you're not starving, and you're keeping insulin low so it can get rid of body fat stores like it's supposed to instead of holding on to them or trying to increase them.
Right.
And in a high stress environment, it's actually really beneficial keeping that keeping insulin levels low and having that fat, because cortisol can actually help you mobilize a lot of body fat and burn body fat as long as insulin's not around.
Sure. So then conversely on carb backloading, obviously after a training session you want to maximize insulin for as long as possible, just to help replenish glycogen stores, and obviously to help repair and start building muscle. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. That's an easy. You should give me more questions like that. That was an easy one.
We should write the books.
Right.
So if we could just touch on a couple of questions that we've had sent in by our readers.
All right. So the first one comes from Zoe, and she says, I find that when I eat bacon and eggs for breakfast, I get hungry an hour later. If I have carbs with breakfast, but I'm fine for hours. So what can I eat to keep me satisfied for longer?
That's an interesting one. Some people tolerate carbs better. So I don't know the type of carbs that she's eating for breakfast. So she could be eating, heavier starches that take longer to release, mixed with a good amount of fat. That would be a nice, good energy. A nice way to control hunger early in the morning. It's not necessarily optimal, but if she's eating bacon and eggs, that she could maybe be extracting too much fat from the bacon or not having enough with those eggs. Eggs can definitely cause you to get hungry not too long after eating those. I would say, what I would try is have your bacon and eggs and add some heavy whipping cream to some coffee, like a few tablespoons, and see if that helps, or just throw the eggs out and eat the bacon.
She also just said that since eating higher fat and lower carbs, that her cholesterol has gone up a bit. Is that something that she should be worried about?
Not necessarily. It depends on what went up exactly. Sometimes we do see a rise in cholesterol. It's one reason I've been working with Dr. Rocky Patel is to look at, some people's cholesterol levels get, excellent. They were so bad, they got much, much better. And other people's go up slightly. And even when they go up slightly, we see a reversal of arterial damage, of all the things we would normally associate with being unhealthy. And high cholesterol levels, it turns out, even though their cholesterol levels went up, everything else is getting healthier. So it's really not something to be concerned with unless you're seeing continued arterial damage. And there's different tests to look at that and see if that's the case. But at least on Carb Nite, when you take carbs out of the diet, that rise in cholesterol so far has never turned out to be anything other than just an abnormality. You still get healthier, you still get all the benefits. So
I'm actually gonna play back that part to my mum. Apparently, cholesterol equals heart disease. Full stop. So, so I'm gonna play that on repeat for her.
Just put it in on a little repeater when she's asleep.
It's a good idea. And just on Zoe's question as well, she's we probably should have opened with this actually. She's been a borderline type 2 diabetic for a while. Now, while her fasting blood glucose levels have gone down while on Carb Nite, they're still fairly high. Any tips on how she can lower it?
That's an interesting one because some people I don't know what her fasting levels are. She says relatively high. I'm going to guess they're at 100 or slightly above 110, something like that. And what we would like to see, ideally, what we would love to see is, in the 50s and 60s, but a lot of people have a hard time with that. We can get down into the 80s by starting to focus on having more fiber with the diet and maybe shifting protein. Again, it's hard to answer this question for people without knowing their diet, but she could just be eating too much protein and not enough fat, which can also have a lot of effect on blood glucose levels.
Sure.
And in turn with that, it might be a good thing. If you have a lot of body fat to lose, it turns out as you mobilize that body fat, not only are you getting rid of the fatty acids that are stored there, but you're also releasing the glycerol from the triglyceride molecule. And glycerol recycles into glucose and will raise your blood sugar. So it could, in a lot of populations, actually signal that you're losing body fat at a decent rate.
Right, sure.
But just bars in general and these so-called, healthy snacks, are there ingredients that we should be looking out for, or any specific types of artificial sweeteners that really spike insulin, or some that are okay?
In general, my advice is always stay away from the snack items. They're moving you in the opposite direction of your goal, which whole foods are always going to be better. We know what they're going to do. If you're eating bacon, there's one ingredient, it's bacon. It's fat and protein. We know what it's going to do. When you start eating like the bars or some of those processed things, we can't always gauge accurately what's going to happen. And we actually have studies that show just processing basic ingredients and putting them back together can actually change the hormonal effects of eating that food. So you want to be careful with all that stuff, period. Doesn't matter what it's sweetened with or what's in there, you really need to be careful. But in the point of sweeteners, if you're just looking at pure sweeteners, it doesn't really matter much. It's complex because it could be psychologically driven, but like Splenda's fine, Stevia's fine, aspartame for most people is fine. Those things are all okay.
And just on that, I remember in one of the interviews you mentioned a study where obese people tasted something sweet, or they knew what the taste would be, and their blood sugar spiked. Can you just talk about that briefly?
Yeah, it's not their blood sugar that spikes, it's their insulin levels. They can just taste, and in some instances, they're conditioned to just smell something sweet, and they'll have an insulin response before it even reaches their mouth. And that's the psychological component. That's the one we don't know. Odds are, if you're obese, that is the case. If you have a Diet Coke, even though there's no calories and there's just a sweet taste, your body will have an insulin response from you tasting that. So you do need to be careful, particularly the closer you are to being type 2 diabetic, the more those effects come into play.
Right, so it's probably not as cut and dry as the aspartame made me fat. There's a whole lot of other processes within the body that are going to obviously have a bearing on what happens to your insulin levels.
Right. I mean, technically, if you're approaching type 2 diabetes, smelling that cheesecake will contribute to your obesity. So, the sweetener, it just is not the key factor to what's going on.
Sure.
Okay. Our next question comes from Barry, and he says, if I'm gaining fat using carb backloading, what's the first thing to tinker with? And would it be reducing the backloads or reducing the frequency of them, or even eating less calories during the ultra low carb phase of the day?
The first thing I would look at is, are they eating enough fat during the day? Is their fat to protein ratio good in the low carb part of the day? That's the first thing I would look at. The second thing would be backing off on the carbohydrates at night. And then the third thing would be backing off on the calories in that first half of the day when you're low carbohydrate. So that'd be 1, 2, 3.
Sorry, that ratio of protein to fat during the ultra low carb portion, is that a 1-to-1 calorie ratio, or a 1 gram to 1 gram to start with?
No, you're going to want to be lower. You're probably going to want to be 2-to-1 gram wise, and then depending on your goals, you might want to just make up for the bulk of the protein there in the evening, if that 2-to-1 is not giving you enough protein based on your calorie needs.
Sure. And we've got another question from Penny. She wants to know, how clean does her Carb Nite need to be? Is there a limit to the amount of carbs she can consume, because she can consume plenty? And just to add to that, she's been doing Carb Nite for about 8 months. Her results are plateauing, and she finds herself tired a lot of the time. What can she tweak?
So the carbs, it doesn't matter. It's funny. People worry about the quality of the carbs on their Carb Nite if they're on Carb Nite, and they just don't seem to matter. It doesn't matter in the blood work. It often doesn't matter in the initial fat loss. You could be eating too many. So I would look at that. You could just, people can eat massive amounts of carbohydrates sometimes. I'm even amazed at what people tell me to eat. That was subtle. That was very subtle.
I keep forgetting there's a video on the top corner of the screen.
And then if she's plateauing, probably the thing to look for is cutting back her protein during the week. My guess is she's eating too much protein.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the biggest carb night you've had personally, Kiefer?
I probably should have written some of them down. I mean, I've had fiascos. Probably the best I can remember is I lived on this great street that had a bunch of amazing restaurants from Thai and Indian food and sushi. So I started at this pizza place, and this was me and my girlfriend at the time. We ordered a large pizza. Between the two of us, we finished it, and this is thick crust pizza. So this was impressive to begin with. And then we went across the street and had a bunch of sushi. And then we went down the street and ordered a bunch of naan and all kinds of dishes from the Indian restaurant. And then when we got there, we went up to a Thai restaurant and we had a few more things and some desserts. And at the end of that night, I had trouble walking home. I was in so much pain. But that's probably one of the biggest carb nights I can remember where I didn't, lose the first dose of carbs.
And you probably slept for about 20 hours after that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I got up really late the next day, and I don't think I ate the day after until, late in the night. I just was not hungry at all. It was horrible.
That's actually that's actually one of the things that I like best about Carb Nite and Carb Backloading. When you haven't had carbs for a couple of days and then you have that big carb load, you sleep like a baby.
Yeah, it's such great sleep too.
Yeah, that's good stuff. This is a bit of a selfish question for me. I play cricket, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's pretty much baseball. Games go for between 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. Sometimes there's 2 days in a row that we play. So it's a mix of low, medium, and high intensity cardio, basically. So how would you tailor carb backloading to get the best out on the field for that sort of sport?
That one I would be loading. I would be having some pretty big carb backloads 2 days before to really try to get filled up, and then the day of the event, I wouldn't eat any carbohydrates until maybe an hour into the event, and then I would start supplementing based on how my energy levels felt.
And that would be just sugars, would it? Mix of glucose and fructose, or?
Glucose would actually be ideal.
Yeah.
That would be your best source, something that's more glucose based. So you can even do that. Find the fruits that are higher in glucose. I can't remember them off the top of my head. A lot of citrus fruits have more glucose. But then finding drinks that are glucose based, that's usually the easiest route. Rice cakes, crackers are good, snacks like that, corn chips. I'm not exactly sure what your snack foods are in Australia.
We have pretty much everything that you mentioned except cherry turnovers.
Oh, okay. We'll have to find a way to
Danish?
get cherry turnovers there.
I'm not sure. Maybe they're called something else. Are they similar to Danishes?
They're kind of like, so they're usually square, and then there's light, flaky pastry dough, like a croissant.
Okay.
And then they're filled with fruit in the middle, and then folded over and baked.
Right.
So that's a turnover. I don't know if you have anything like that.
We're going to start searching for some after we finish with the interview, I think.
They're really good. That's all I can say.
So just with that endurance-based athlete, so you would do the carbs 2 nights before, not the night before. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would spend 2 nights making sure that the glycogen stores are full, because that's really, if you want maximum performance, you want to rely on your stored carbohydrates in the muscles and not in the liver and not what you're ingesting. So that's always going to give you maximum performance.
Right. Okay.
And just another question. So for people who are doing Carb Nite and find themselves, very fatigued and tired from the lack of carbs, is there anything that they can do to sort of boost their energy levels, or is it just a matter of sort of waiting until your body's used to the fat instead of the carbs?
Especially in the beginning, they really just have to wait until the body's used to the carbs. What's going on there is to get ketones and short chain fatty acids into the brain really efficiently. It takes I've talked about GLUT transporters in muscle before, which transport glucose. In the brain, they're called MCTs for monocarboxylate transporters, and those have to be upregulated. So there's really no way to speed that up, unfortunately. You can help a little bit by supplementing with coconut oil. That could speed the process a little bit, but for most people, they're just going to have to endure that kind of lethargy and brain fog that happens during that first period.
And we're just going to check again. So that was no on Quest bars, is that right?
That is no on Quest bars. That is correct.
So just on supplements, Kiefer, you mentioned in carb backloading particularly, you're a fan of MCT oil, of creatine, of leucine, of whey hydrolysate. Is there anything else since carb backloading that you might have found a benefit to using?
No, that's pretty much still the basis of what I recommend. I'm not big on supplements in general, so I kind of want to stick with the stuff that's the biggest punch for what you're going to get and the things we know that there's definite results from. And those are really the key ones. The only thing I might add for some people is a probiotic or a prebiotic if they might need it for digestive reasons. But otherwise, those are kind of the core supplements that I stick with.
Sure. So things like multivitamins and fish oil and things like that, you would obviously prefer to get that from the diet. Is there any use for them for some people?
For some people, it's actually a lot easier for them to get their omega-3 needs from fish oil. So depending on what their diet is like, fish oil is a good supplement. And then multivitamins, I'm becoming more and more of a fan of those. For some people, their diet's really not varied enough, or for whatever reasons, they really should take a multivitamin. So a multivitamin is never a bad idea, in my opinion, and the research is showing that you're going to cover a lot of bases if you take a multivitamin. But for some reason, I never think to tell people to take a multivitamin. I don't know what it is.
Maybe because the last few years there's been a bit of a shift, I guess, away from supplementation, more to whole foods. I guess things like the paleo movement, things like that, where people are kind of focusing more on, I guess, quality of food and nutrients rather than supplements. So I guess it's a bit of a cycle the way that sort of works.
Yeah, and for me, I was around before paleo, way before paleo, and just kind of taking a multivitamin is just something I've always done. So I've never thought to tell people to do it, and now I'm realizing nobody takes a multivitamin. So it's like, oh, well, maybe you should start doing that.
Now, feel free to get into a rant, but what do you think of the whole paleo movement? Are there certain aspects that you do like about it, certain aspects you don't? Where do you kind of fit in with that sort of diet?
I like their focus on whole foods. I think that's really important. In general, I think it's a bad movement. They're causing a lot of, we already have so much trouble with food guilt and food avoidance and the stress that comes with that. And they're just adding a whole new layer onto it. And as the science, the problem with that diet is it's what I would call a science-based diet, which means you can find a lot of research to support your ideas, but it's not based on known human physiology. Like, we know how the body works at the cellular level and up. And paleo ignores all of that. It ignores it in favor of, this is how we ate 1 million years ago, and the humans haven't evolved in the last 100,000 years, which is actually false. We've got more and more genome studies showing that we're evolving faster now than ever in human history. So we've made a lot of changes. We're still making changes. So the entire concept is flawed from the start. And then you're adding like all these food fears that people have, and they're worried about gluten. And now that we're actually testing the diet against other things, it turns out that it really is not any better than just say the standard low glycemic American diet that you're supposed to eat, but that most people never do. It's another way for people to ignore that carbohydrates are the important thing. It's like, just if you eat paleo, then magically everything's going to be fine, and you eat potatoes and rice. Rice is now okay even in paleo, even though it didn't used to be. And Potatoes are a safe starch, even though, and stuff like that to me is so stupid, because if you have a Eastern European background, potatoes should be one of the most dangerous things that you could eat, because Europeans have only had potatoes in their diet for 500 years. And we've had wheat in the diet for 10,000 years, but it's like, oh no, potatoes are totally safe, don't worry about it. But we've never had them in our diet, so the whole thing is just, the more research that comes out, and the more I look into it, and the more I'm around it, it feels almost idiotic to me at this point. They're just now kind of scrapping around for, oh, well, it doesn't work for you, and maybe this is why, and oh, don't go paleo, do a paleo template, or oh, well, it's not just paleo, it's just wheat's addictive, and so it's a mess, and it's pretty much useless, I think. It will get most people healthy, because that focus on whole foods, which I really like, that's really important. And getting people to eat more whole foods is very important, but I don't think it matters if the cow that you got your butter from ate grass. They've actually got research on that now. It doesn't make any difference at all. I don't think it matters if your food's organic. Just if you're eating whole foods or foods closer to the original source, you're going to get healthier. And we've known that for a long time, and we didn't call it paleo. We called it eating intelligently. But now it's branded, and everybody's on this paleo bandwagon, and I'm just really not a fan. It's too much hype and not enough help.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So in terms of whole foods, I'm not sure if you're still training clients or if you're more focused on research now. Are you still training athletes?
Every once in a while, there's somebody I'll take on, whether it's an athlete or an extreme case. But now I'm doing more research and writing, and just trying to get more information, more people, and actually training trainers under me, so that they can start working with clients and take up the load that way.
Sure. So just in your experience in the past, and what you've seen in the research, in terms of whole foods, are there certain foods that you would or would not include with athletes that get better performance? I think I heard you mention once you were talking about wheat for a stage competitor. The week before a competition is probably not a good idea because of bloating and things like that. Are there other things like that you can sort of touch on?
For in general, when you get a lot of the grains, that's why potatoes work and are safe for people. They don't usually they don't have as many components that can cause bloating issues. So potatoes are pretty good, but white rice, those grains are fine. Wheat, I just find a lot of people will have a reaction because they've been low carb for so long, or they've limited carbs in a way that they have a significant reaction. But otherwise, and you have to think for wheat, most of the time we get it, it's already been processed pretty far down the line. It's white bread, or it's in pastries, or it's in crackers, or it's already been pretty highly processed. Not too many people just gnaw on wheat grain very often, which would probably be fine. That would probably be okay to do, and you wouldn't have a lot of bloating from that. But in general, most whole sources of food are fine. The only thing that slips through my radar that I don't know how it fits into the diet, to be honest, is fruit. Fruit is one of those things that I look at as some sort of treat or a dessert. But otherwise, pretty much most whole foods are going to treat you pretty well.
Sure. Is fruit more of a personal reaction? Do some people do better on fruit than others, or are there certain fruits that are a bit too high in fructose for most people? Or
it's just most fruit has a pretty good insulin response. And then the fruits that don't then have a high fructose content. So it's just it's one of those things that just doesn't fit very well compared to I come back to potatoes and rice. I mean, those are going to break down into glucose derivatives mainly, which is awesome. It doesn't recomp liver glycogen stores as well. It doesn't contribute to the creation of cholesterol as much or other fat derivatives in the liver. And it's primarily tries to be used by muscle tissue. So Those are just easy. Those are easy to put in the diet. Fruit, it just becomes more and more difficult to work fruit into the diet as kind of a mainstay of carbohydrates.
Sure. So this might be a bit of a broad question then, but we're having some issues here with obesity, just like the US and Mexico. And is there something that you can point your finger at? I mean, we've heard Robert Lustig, for example, talk about fructose. Is it carbohydrates? Is it a lack of exercise? Is it fructose? Is it anything? Or is it everything together that you can sort of pinpoint?
I think as far as the least important factor there is activity level, to be honest. We've got great studies now across broad populations that show it doesn't matter how active you are or how sedentary you are, your body finds, there seems to be this almost universal metabolic rate that the body finds for burning calories. And it turns out actually obese people have a faster metabolism. They're actually burning more energy sitting around doing nothing than people who are highly active. So the activity level, isn't as important as people think. It's important for other health reasons, but not necessarily becoming obese. And the fructose is way overplayed. If you look at really the problem there, it's fructose by itself is actually can be somewhat beneficial. It's really that overload of carbohydrates and the insulin response. Insulin is what triggers all the fat storage. Insulin is what can shuttle fructose, its byproducts, into creating more fat, lipogenic substrates. It really is the insulin. Insulin turns on all these things, and the only way to get an insulin spike is to eat carbohydrates, specifically glucose-based ones. So, wheat falls into that, rice falls into that, potatoes fall into that, fruit falls into that, any starch falls into that. You can't get away from the fact that it is the carbohydrates because of their insulin response that they cause. It's not, fructose is just, fructose is another distraction. It's like, oh, well, if you never have high fructose corn syrup or table sugar again, you'll be healthy. And that's just not the case. And we have some population studies to show that that's not the case. Even people who've been on low glycemic diets for long periods of time, but have a significant carbohydrate load, so they still get pretty high insulin response compared to a ketogenic diet, they gain weight, they gain body fat, and almost unavoidably, their exercise level does not matter. So again, like the culprit, if you look at as much research as you can possibly get your hands on, the culprit is obviously carbohydrates. I mean, just end of story. And I think we're going to see probably about 200 more movements like paleo and this anti-fructose before people finally admit that it's carbohydrates that are the problem.
It's so amazing because everything we're told our whole lives, just eat rice and eat fruits and eat vegetables and you'll be healthy. And
then
this
energy.
And all the
Right.
research is the absolute opposite.
Yeah, it is amazing. And like I said, we're going to see so many more iterations of different types of diets to distract us from the fact that it's the carbohydrates before people finally admit it.
Well, I mean, to be fair, low carb had its turn a few years ago, so it's probably low fat again next, and then maybe low protein for a while, and then we'll come back to low carb. So it's all a cycle.
Right.
So Kiefer, what's on the cards for you for the future? You said you're doing some research at the moment and writing. There's a Carb Backloading 2.0 coming out. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. The end of this year, Carb Backloading 2 will be out. And again,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and again, that'll be more geared towards athletes and high performance and getting healthier through high performance as well. And then there will probably be a reboot to Carb Nite coming up soon, but I don't want to talk too much about that yet.
No problem at all.
And where can our readers and listeners find out more about the work that you do and all of your research?
Pretty much everything right now can be found through body.io is my main portal. Everything's there. Everything will I'm actually redoing the website again, so everything will be there, including, I'm launching a supplement line in a couple months. Unfortunately, I won't be shipping to Australia yet, so you'll have to wait, but that'll be there, and I've got some really cool software tools that will be coming online slowly this year, and will be ready next year completely, and that'll all be at body.io.
Sounds great. Obviously, if you do have the supplement line coming to Australia, we'll be stocking it first, so it's cool, right?
Yeah, I'm looking into it. Actually, the company I work with does have manufacturers in Australia, so that was one reason I went with them, is so that I could expand there if necessary. Yeah, all my products, they're not going to meet the label claims at all. They're just going to be sugar, and see, I figure that way, if I make people fat, then they're going to buy the diet books more, and they'll buy even more supplements. So that's my plan. I'm going the Atkins route, which is basically what he did with his supplements.
Just make sure you don't recommend the supplements in your book, otherwise,
Yeah, there's some legal issues there, actually.
That sounds great. Well, Kiefer, it's been an absolute treat for us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a lot of fun.